everybody. Today I'm sat with Dr. Chris Platts, who is doing some fascinating research into academies in football all over the UK. Well, not only in the UK, he's visiting clubs overseas as well. Over the past couple of months, Chris and I have delved into Chris's findings. We've had some interesting conversations. So I thought it would be great to get Chris on the pod, chew the fat, see what we can find, debate, challenge, bring it to life. So, Chris, great to have you here with us today.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Like you say, we've had plenty of these conversations going off behind the scenes, so to speak. So yeah, it'd be good to sit down and over the next 40 minutes or so see how we get on.
So, tell us a little bit about your background. Why did you enter into this space? What got you to this point to where you are today?
Yeah, I did sport and exercise science undergraduate. Towards the end of that, I was introduced to something called the sociology of sport. That was new to me, but it was something that really began to explain a lot in maybe in life around gender, class, and being brought up in the sort of a working class city of Sheffield. A lot of things started to make sense to me. I quite enjoyed it, and then we moved on to how you then can use the understanding from sociology for things like policy implementation, big organisational workings, how big corporations or the NHS, for example, how they function, and if I'm honest, it was like a bit of a moment where I began to really enjoy academic study. I became
Yeah.
good at it. I went on and did a master's in the sociology of sport, and from there, just towards the end of the masters, I'd got that thirst for knowledge, for learning, for
Yeah.
wanting to develop further, and I inquired about a PhD. It so happened that I think the University of Chester saw that there was an opportunity. There was somebody who hadn't fulfilled his potential, perhaps in terms of studying yet, and they were really good to me. They helped fund me through a PhD that looked at the education and welfare experiences of professional football academy players. At that time, they were academies and centres of excellence, so we're going back
Yeah.
quite a bit at that point.
So sorry, Chris. When was this? What year?
So I started my PhD in 2009.
Okay.
2008, 2009, yeah, just towards the end of 2008. Um, and then, as is, if anybody's known who's sort of done a PhD, you get this bit, and I was certainly in the space of thinking, how am I going to get enough data? Why would clubs talk to me? I wanted to speak to the players about their experiences. There'd been work by now Professor Martin Roderick, Andrew Parker, but they were sort of maybe 10 to 15 years out of date, and a new study around what's it like to be in a professional football academy. I wrote to every academy and centre of excellence. 90 out of 92 clubs had
Yeah.
one at that point. Um, I ended up with 21 clubs agreeing. There's
Got a
obviously more than
mandate.
that. Yeah, big rate. And to be honest, I was really surprised at how many were so willing to help, um, and help with access. It was academy managers who said, look, yeah, I think we could help. And it started to lift the lid on the fact that there was actually a story here,
Okay.
that many people in the game knew perhaps some of the issues that were occurring in the academy system. And it changed my life. Doing that piece of research changed my life. I ended up with 303 players
Hmm.
from 21 clubs, from the top of the Premier League to League Two,
Hmm.
all with telling me about their experiences. Focus groups that went on for an hour when they're just really opening up. And I got to a point of leaving probably the PhD thinking, this is now just life's work.
Yeah.
Like there are how many thousands of kids are going to keep going through this system, and you are now sat on data, and you can spend the rest of your life collecting and developing data that can help players. Now, as it's continued, now includes families, it includes clubs, where we can take data from different cohorts, and we can actually develop strategies for navigating the world of professional football. Whether that's you're a club, whether you're an agent, whether you're a player, that's where I am now.
Let's set the scene a little bit. So, I entered the academy system not as a player, unfortunately, I'm too old for that, but back in 1998 when the academy started. I was head of the medical department for the academy at Manchester City. And over the years, I've seen multiple changes. Obviously, probably the biggest change being the E-Triple-P 10, 12, 13 years ago, whenever it was now. So I've seen how clubs have adapted, changed the reason whys, so on and so forth. So from your perspective, with regards your research, in your findings, how many clubs do you believe truly understand why they're actually running an academy?
Let me just clarify one thing from your question because I do think this is important. When you say how many clubs, clubs don't in and of themselves exist, but the people in them do. So I think the question is probably how many CEOs, how many owners, how many directors of football can sit down and can honestly say, this is why we are running our academy. And I think that there are a significant number of clubs who haven't got down to that level of detail. And the reason for that isn't always their fault. It's not sort of like, oh, well, you don't know why what you're doing with your academy. It's the reality of football clubs is shift, is constant shift, new ownership models, new owners, new ownership models, promotions, relegations, financial constraints, changes outside the game. You know, even COVID comes along. There are it is such a volatile environment, as you well know, to then try and be strategic. But I think that the first step that I would always take with a football club, sitting down with a director of football or a CEO, is why are you running an academy? If you are telling me that you are spending £3 million on a Category 2 academy, Aston Villa in their accounts, £18 million on their academy per season, why? What are we aiming to do? And then it's Simon Sinek's work, isn't it? We'll start with why. Once we've got the why, does everybody know that? Is everybody on board with why we are running this academy? I truly believe you could even bring in more than just like the staff. I think there's an element of parents could be brought in on this, and you could be going, this is why we are here. We'd love for you to be a part of this, but this is why we occur. We're a League One club, and we are a players in, develop, sell on. And the selling on is part of one of the pillars of our strategy as a club to keep ourselves sustainable. We're your kid's 10, but we're being honest. This, and I think in many respects, I find clubs are in many cases in spaces where the academy is left to itself, which is sort of all right. You want to empower people to run the academy as best they can, but it's such a vital element of what of your club. Is there then a link into really the top level, which is sort of what I think I want to talk to you about here today, is how do we make sure that at the top level we're talking about why the academy exists? What are we trying to do with it? And does everybody in the academy know that? And is there then a communication from the academy back up to this top level of the club so that we're constantly monitoring it? I don't mean that in an awful way, but on top of how we're performing and what things we perhaps need to change to help academies.
Yeah, it's a good question you posed me there. So in my experience, if we go back to the start of the academy system, I would make a strong assumption that the very vast majority of clubs had an academy to bring players through into the first team. That was the quite singular vision, but that goes back to 1997, 1998, I think it was then. The growth of the game, particularly in the UK, through the likes of the Premier League, has meant that vision through to ownership models that you mentioned, and multiple other things has without question changed. I think that there are clubs out there who run academies simply because they perceive that they have to run it, they have to have an
Yeah.
academy.
Yeah.
So, what does that then mean operationally and strategically? There are now many, many, many clubs out there now, particularly the bigger clubs, who, whilst getting players through into the first team is fantastic. The community want to see that. Now with PSR and FFP, obviously it's financially beneficial for that to happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of these bigger clubs now see it as a revenue stream to sell players and move players on. Manchester City, Chelsea have been, probably at the forefront of that over the years, whilst at the same time they have brought one or two players through. Um, so it due to the constraints that we now operate in financially, there are other reasons that have manifested themselves over the years behind why a football club has an academy. Great question you pose with regards to, does everyone know within that club what the real purpose of the academy is? Um, and again, you then go back to the day-to-day operations of the club, the pressures that are on the managers. Um, are they interested in the academy? If no players are coming through, how much attention do they offer the academy? Then again, is it their job? I'm not too sure. There
So
are
let me give you a scenario in that to work from, because again, without naming the club, one of the top clubs in the Premier League in England, I was there this week, and they've got a scenario where the first team manager wants a goalkeeper to come up from the I think it's the under 21 squad
yeah,
to be with the first team, but he's consequently now not getting as much game time and isn't being allowed out on loan. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking that's an extra body for training for the first team, great, and the first team manager wants to see him, fine. But at the same time, we've now got a goalkeeper who could be playing more at the age of 20, could be out on loan, is behind three other goalkeepers, so ain't going to play for the first team. At what point is that we have to have that director of football role taking those strategic or helping the manager to understand why strategically this player is going to actually go out on loan rather than be just training with the first. I say just training with the first team. It's clearly a very good achievement.
yeah.
But you see what I mean? That's a sort of disconnect strategically where we might have a goalkeeper on our hands who by the time he's 26 is going to be our first team regular. But if we just keep him training with we've not got him near the edge of his comfort zone. We've not got him trying. We've not got him out on loan making mistakes to reflect from and these sorts of things, which we all know are so good for his development.
I agree. And I've been in meetings when I've been working with clubs where those conversations are constantly going on. What is the best approach here? And I've been in meetings where the reality is that individual is a number, is a body on the field for the first team, as an example. Um, I also truly believe that underneath that quite transactional conversation, there are deeper conversations going on with regards to what is the most appropriate plan for this individual. Is it a loan today? Is it a loan in a month's time? I believe that that's the complexity in which the performance staff are working in day to day.
Yeah,
And at a moment in time, it could look like the consideration of that particular player is not at the forefront of their mind at that moment in time. I also believe that you could revisit that in 2 or 3 months' time, and that has transitioned into a loan or something. So I feel that they're operating in grey areas constantly. Um, with when a lot of people don't have the relevant detail to or information to answer that question. You, on the other hand, have because you've looked into that. But that brings me into the question of the relationship between the sporting directorate and the academy,
Yeah, yeah,
which is fascinating, and again will be challenged differently at different clubs, given the maturity of that club, the needs, the wants, where they are at that moment in time. So what's been your experience of that relationship, sporting director and academy, throughout your research?
yeah. Probably every step along the spectrum would be the answer to that. And in some respects, I think it all starts with that previous question that we talked about, where if you look at a club like a Benfica, they have a very clear vision of what their Benfica campus, their academy, they have a very clear vision of what it's about. And they get players, they have a lot of room for developing them in an under 21 side, an under 23 side, a B team, and then they fire them towards the markets of the Premier League, La Liga, probably. João Felix to Atletico Madrid, obviously the biggest one. Therefore, it's really clear what that academy is trying to achieve. So I think when you're interviewing for people to come into a sporting director role at that club, it's how can you then, Tony, you're going to come and be a sporting, you want to be a sporting director here at SL Benfica. How are you going to do that? Contrast that with a different scenario, and all right, Sheffield Wednesday down the road from where I am now, a lot of a mess at the moment, but within the next few months, I would think a new owner is going to go in there. Right, let's have a sporting
Did that
director.
before.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the new owner comes in to a club that's been obviously left in a real mess. If you don't first say, why are we using the academy? Right, okay, let's have a sporting director. What would I be asking you about the? I would more likely then, am I going? Do you want to do some work with the academy? Are you is that going to fall under your remit, or are you just want do you want the first team and then what kind of the academy is separate? And I've seen that in so many scenarios. And again, I think that becomes a fundamental structure of your club. I was at a presentation. It was the guy was actually a former finance officer at Parma in Italy, but a line that he came out with, which was just I thought was brilliant, which was if you want to secure next season, sign a player. If you want to secure a legacy, spend money on your structures. And it really resonated with me that how many clubs have really got to grips with what their structure is and why it is the way it is. Some are clearly incredibly proficient at it, incredibly proficient, but others are left meandering. I would suggest in that respect, and that's when you get this sporting director. Am I doing the academy? Am I not doing it? I don't know.
Relates across all businesses, that Chris, in my
Yeah,
experience, isn't it? Signing a player is sexy. It's become sexy, should we say? It enables people to go and play with someone else's money.
yeah,
Is the reality of that?
yeah,
But systems and structures and processes are what hold a business together, particularly when things might not be going according to a plan.
yeah,
Absolutely critical. Yeah, I agree. I suppose what you're talking about there, a case at point at the moment is Ajax. Ajax have been um, super smart over
yeah,
the years at bringing players through. It's their culture, it's their DNA, isn't it? And over the last couple of years, that's stalled somewhat. They've actually gone out and spent a lot of money for Ajax, and they're now having one or two issues with regards to what is our culture now. Have we got those systems and structures in place similar to what we've had? Do we need to bring someone else in? Do we need to go at it from a different example? So Ajax is going to be an interesting case study to look at moving forward.
Yeah,
Have you been out there and
absolutely.
spoke to them?
I haven't actually. No, no, that would be a yeah, that'd be a great. I mean, I think there's a lot. I think there's a hell of a lot of noise at Birmingham City at the moment about their academy and where they're going with the new ownership and new stadium, new training
Yeah,
complex.
yeah,
We want to have the best academy in the country, and you think, well, wow, okay, what's this going to look like? So there's a hell of a lot with that as well. I actually think as well, this is going to get more complicated now. But not only then do you have a structure, but where's your strategy with the players that you are bringing through as well? And that's where I believe a director of football probably does have to have some power at a club.
yeah,
Um, there are Kobe Mainu, I think, is the most high profile at the moment in terms of what's occurred there. But at the same time, it's happened before. Um, I heard somebody talking about Ruben Loftus Cheek, and Ruben Loftus Cheek's about to come to the forefront at Chelsea, and they signed Oscar and Hazard.
mm,
Well, they, so is it the manager goes out and signs those two players? They bring in Hazard, who's had 2 years playing in Belgian football, and Loftus Cheek had one or two Carabao Cup appearances. Now, at that point, that to me strikes where okay, strategically, what no conversations were going on there about the how we made sure that Ruben Loftus Cheek at the age of 25, 26 was a mainstay of Chelsea's club. We missed a step, and it's sort of what's occurring with Kobe Mainu of 2 years ago. A hell of a lot of upheaval at Manchester United again. So, but do we have a conversation where we say it's a difficult one? It's not an easy conversation, but we have a captain who, fine, we've backed him. He is in the way of a player who potentially in 5 years' time could be, a real mainstay of our midfield, and we believe has the ability to play top end Premier League and Champions League. Do we have that discussion? The next question is, how do we then do that?
yeah. I think in my experience, Chris, when I say I think I change, I know in my experience those are conversations that go on constantly all the time. Um, have using the Maino example, have they just decided at that point in time that he is not going to be suitable to play for Manchester United with regards to the style that we want to play? This person that we've identified in the marketplace is going to be more suitable, and we know that Kobe Mainu has got to a point now where we could bring in some significant funds for them.
Mm,
So these conversations are happening. You've got smart people around the table who will be involved
yeah,
in these conversations. You've got people with a lot of experience. You've got people with strong personalities that will be involved in those conversations. And then, of course, you go back to your initial point. What is the structure and what is the systems they are working in? They've now got all these financial pressures which are on the clubs. Are we bringing in a player that has got a higher profile who we think is capable, more than capable of performing on the pitch, but actually he's got commercial value off the pitch for us as well.
yeah,
And
correct.
and
Yeah,
this is part of the modern game now, and this is part of the conversations that go on. So I often find myself looking at these examples and thinking from the outside looking in, it can be occasionally black and white. In my experience, it's not.
no,
It's dirty, it's muddy, it's messy, and
no.
everyone's trying to work through the right answer. I was in a conversation
In a scenario where there isn't a right
where
answer,
there
sometimes
isn't a right answer. I
there's
was in
just an answer.
yeah,
Correct.
a
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
the other day where someone said to me, already this season, Amarin has been sacked twice, and now look at him. the 2 points off, 3 points off fourth in the league, and the team might be looking at buying into what's being done. They've managed to claw a draw in the last couple of minutes in the last 2 or 3 games. It looks like the players are fighting for the
Yeah,
badge, so to speak. And this is me sat with a Man City shirt in the background. Um, but you can see how these things happen in a moment in time, and people have to make a decision. And of course, with hindsight, that decision can look wrong.
yeah,
At that moment in time, it could be the right decision based on all the multiple activities that are going on in
yeah.
the club. It's not easy
It's
to keep on saying.
oh, I mean, it is so complex. It is
Yeah,
so complex, and
yeah.
the data highlights, some of those complexities. But the other element probably comes back, which we haven't talked about here, is I think there are clubs who every now and then, maybe Benfica are one of those, they will sometimes sacrifice performance in a league for one season
Mm,
for a different outcome
mm,
because it's about getting okay, we're sometimes we call it a transition period or whatever. We have a younger squad
yeah.
and we need to get them minutes. Now it might be quite
A
easier
big
for say a
call, that, isn't
Benfica
it?
because yeah, you look at the strength of the Portuguese, top division and it's not the Premier Leagues, but there are
How do you communicate
oh
that to
exactly. Do you communicate? Do you communicate it? Correct. Yeah, even in that scenario. But I mean, there are clubs who lower down in the football pyramid, aren't there, in the UK who are quite open, going, look, this is what
Crew
we are.
Alexander?
Yeah, exactly. We're not trying to be this, and um, Wolves have sort of stumbling a little bit in that space, I think, at the moment, aren't they? They've clearly sold on assets and made money from those sales, but now is it were Wolves going to stay in the Premier League forever? Probably not. They're in a bit of a tricky situation with that regard. A lot of it, though, I think it does come back, doesn't it, to how do you have a vision of what your academy's for, and what are we as a club, and what are we trying to achieve? I think that can be communicated with fans. I think that can be communicated a lot with fans. For the top clubs, City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, there's no negotiating on what it is, on who you are, you know. But even a Villa, Everton's, you know, I do think they can really have a vision of what we want to be. That if they don't turn around and say, well, we might not win the league, I don't think their fans are going to be completely upset about that. I think they can be a bit more realistic about where they are. Um,
Chris, a question that I want to pose at you with regards to your research, and it's a conversation I get involved in often with academy managers, coaches, managers, sporting directors, is how you create that culture within an academy nowadays, from the very young age groups coming all the way through to the scholars. A winning culture, because winning,
mhm.
we can't get away from the fact that any sport, you win or you lose. And every kid that plays football wants to win. They go onto that pitch and they want to win. The coaches want to win. The parents want to win. And we've come from a culture when academies started in the 90s, which was quite tough, to the point, didactic. You're told what to do, how to do it, when to do it. People didn't hold back on critiquing performance, etc., etc. And we're probably an era now where that style of conversation has to be refined a little bit more. We've got societal issues, education, school, etc., etc., which means we function and we operate in a different environment. Nevertheless, I do feel that um, the behaviours required to be successful and to win in sport are pretty much the same. Such as the ability to compete, being part of a team, dealing with defeat, understanding how to win, failure, disappointment, discipline, being resilient. being resilient is obviously extremely important. What did you learn around how academies function with regards to that?
Yeah, I think this was probably the top thing that comes up from conversations I have in clubs as
Mm,
well. And I'm pretty strong on this, and I don't think it's popular what I
mm,
say,
mm,
but I'm pretty strong on it.
mm, mm,
I think it points to why countries around the world who are have less access to resource
mm.
outperform us when they come to international competitions and things.
Good point.
So I would be pretty strong on this. The academy system in this country has come from a historical place of strict hierarchy, strict hierarchy that we would probably mirror onto factories, shop floor cultures from the 70s, 80s. And those hierarchies still exist. I go into academies, quite a bit, and if there's even the mention of a first team being around, it's like there's a change in atmosphere. First team coach, there's different kit for the scholars compared to the first team. Often, new training complexes are designed in ways which is sort of a corridor from one end to the other, where you start at this end and you work your way up towards the better end. So fundamentally, I believe it's not that I don't think there should be any hierarchy. I think there should be respect. But respect is earned. You don't just treat people in a way that's disrespectful and then turn around and go, well, I'm doing that because you've got to respect me. So my take on how a culture needs to be in an elite sporting environment now would be it is about holistic development of a child first, not a player. So I would push more and more young coaches, coaches of our younger people to study psychology of children.
Agree
How
completely. Yeah.
how do they handle things like rejection?
Chris, just one point. I think I just want to stress that. I think that's so important what you say there. The amount of clubs that I worked in where managers, first team managers, had oversight, had say of what goes on in the academy. And I would openly engage in those conversations and I would say respectfully, you're a first team manager. You deal with, 6'5", ugly centre halves who are there to get the nose broken, save a potential goal on the goal line, get you 3 points, off you go. What do you know around the psychosocial development of younger people? And therefore, don't put yourself in that position, but bring in those individuals are experts in that space. And for years and years and years, that was a real bugbear of mine.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be that we have good coaches at that level, but we're not just, we're talking about developing people there. So in 10 years' time, when the coach turns around, the first team manager's like, right, lads, we need 11 leaders out there. How much leadership work did you do with your young kids then as they were coming through the system?
Mm,
Most clubs would go none, really. We kind of saw who came to the fore as a leader, but it's now okay for the coach to turn around and be like, we need leaders out there. But I didn't see any leadership development.
yeah,
Um, so it has to be the holistic development of kids. And people will say, oh, Nicky Butt did it in the media last week. Oh, so that's the expense of winning. It might cost winning in places. It might do because you've got to try. You are still in a development phase. That isn't saying, right, so we're going to go out and try to lose, but we're going to go out and try to do this to win.
yeah,
This might be a bit more risky in doing that, and it could cost us. One of the common ones is we're going to leave our two centre backs one on one with both their strikers for this game because we want them under. We've been working on one, but that's training. Let's do it in a match. So you two centre backs, you're on your own for the whole game. That could cost us the win, but it's the under 18s. And if next year, if you're saying the first team manager goes, he's good, right? Come up with us. What's going to happen in the first team, and you get that one-on-one
Yeah,
scenario.
yeah.
So I do think the holistic development. It is no team, I believe, will ever go out onto a pitch going, right, we'll try and lose this one, or not even try
No,
to win.
never gonna happen. Yeah,
Of course, but if we are talking about holistic development of young people, that every now and then could end up being okay. Well, that's kind of cost us that we went full pressing. We went full pressing and we went for it, but now we've got all this video on it. It is every now and then. I would,
it goes
I
back
would
to
then
the
say,
purpose, the
of
purpose
course,
that you spoke about. This
yeah,
is for another pod, Chris. We should continue this, but when I was at Blackburn, we put in place a player-led team culture within the academy. This was in 2004. We brought in an individual from the England Rugby Union side called Yehuda Shiner, who was an Israeli business coach in 2004. And we put in a player led team culture with Gary Bowyer, who is the manager now of Burton Albion.
yeah,
We would integrate the players doing the team talks, for example. Before the game, half time, we'd get them to deliver the team talks. We would get them to do all the warm ups. We would get them to design their culture, their values, and so on and so forth. We even got them designing training sessions during the week. We wanted to create what we called response able players so that during a game, when an incident happened, they had the cognitive ability to be able to make decisions themselves.
yeah,
And this was back in 2004, but it was way too early. It was too early within the structure, within the system, for the culture to really be malleable and change. So
yeah,
I'm 100% on board with you in that infrastructure of a club. These things add great value and they add to your ability to be able to win and be more resilient.
yeah.
But the education, I don't think, is still to this day in place yet.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think as well. I've written down here. Give young people credit. I probably most of my work with young people now. They if they're given space and they are given time, they can understand more complicated things than I think we sometimes give them credit for.
Mm.
The key is where are you going to give them space and time to process some of those things. And that can be hard in a football club environment when right, it's training and then lads, you got to get in for your food. This afternoon we've got life skills program, and they're kind of like jumping from one thing to then they go home and they're shattered. And where are we building in space where they can decompress a bit and take in what's happened? And I think sometimes we have to be open to the fact that needs to be away from coaches and club staff, because those coaches and club staff mean that the relationship that the player has with those coaches is a bit of a complicated one. They don't always want to show everything to a coach. They want to show the coach what they think the coach wants to see, is what I would say. That's come through definitely stronger in my research.
Coaches and club staff are always no, always is wrong. Are generally in a state of they're constantly making decisions. This player's good. This player isn't good. This player's got potential. Forget this person, and so on and so forth. And it's difficult to take yourself out of that mindset when
Yeah,
you operate in that environment, which is about making decisions for that player to move to the next level, to the next level,
yeah,
to the next level.
yeah, absolutely. And the other and in there is sort of, I would then say, in that culture, where are we modelling behaviours? So where are we modelling behaviours? Didn't say that very well. Um, I've seen coaches talk to players about phones and then be on the phone themselves. I've seen talk about trust, but then behaviours that completely undermine the trust a player has in a coach. Um, how are we? How are we making sure that the young players see what the first team do
Mm.
when we have them split off? or we, and not at every club, but again, first team managers can come in and go, shut that door. First team's here, under 21s and below. You crack on with that. This is my group. And I go, hang on a minute. How are we getting this group to see what it is like? You've mentioned it there, to be a professional footballer. How are we getting them to see the brutality of some of it? The the moments when you're going through really, really dark times. And then I'm a big, big fan of Brene Brown and her work. Um,
Vulnerability.
when we're talking about vulnerability, courage, fear, in a football club environment, have you ever come across anybody who wants to go, right, I'm a bit scared here, but there is no way you can't have courage, this Brene Brown, you can't have courage without fear. If you were to write down, right, tell me all the times in football match you needed to be courageous, you could list 40 probably like that. Well, for each of those scenarios, in order for you to be courageous, there had to be some feeling of fear.
Hmm.
So it's not like this fear is something that we can just pretend isn't there. We can't be like, what you scared of?
Hmm.
I always thought Gareth Southgate was very good at articulating the weight of the England shirt and the look. You are going to be a bit scared going into a World Cup with the hopes of a nation on you. That's just normal.
And yet you don't want to tell your opponents that.
Yeah. Or do you go? We're talking about this because, and the reason we're doing that is because this is going to happen out there on that pitch.
Mm.
We can all, and as men, we can all put a mask on. This is Goffman's work of. We can all put the mask on when we go front stage and pretend it's like the greatest job in the world and we're out there and we're fighting, and then I'll go on a podcast and pretend I loved my life and everything was brilliant about it. Bullshit.
Mm.
These, and we could have a 17, 18, 19 year old. I watched a 19 year old playing the Champions League for Benfica. They've got not got a point this season yet in the Champions League. You're telling me he's not going to walk out with some level of fear? Yet nobody in the organisation that is now fully relying on him on that pitch has tried to help him deal with that. And I think that is a long, long way from most academies to be in this space, in this level of complexity around things like vulnerability, holistic development of the people. But I think if you did that, you'd get better people coming through your academy and therefore better players. You would get better leaders.
Yeah. And I come back to again. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine actually recently. If you joined an academy at 10 years of age and you go all the way through to 17, you get released, and you might get an opportunity at somewhere else, and you get released, and you drop out of the game, and then there's they didn't look after me, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. I go back on that 8, 9, 10 year long journey for that young individual. And obviously, depending on what academies have played at, they've potentially travelled the world playing in tournaments here, there, and everywhere. They've they've developed the ability to commit, to discipline themselves. They've learned about health, nutrition. They've lost. They've been critiqued. They've had some fantastic memories. Physically, they're in peak condition, etc., etc. If you compare that to comparing is difficult, but if you compare that to someone of their age that hasn't particularly had a passion and has just gone
Mm-hmm.
to school, gets to 17 years of age and he's maybe a little bit, don't know what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to college. I think the life experiences that they have developed and they've grown are fantastic. And if they can only harness that, and they probably need the help and support of someone or something to do that, they can take those experiences and those life skills and adapt them, apply them to multiple different environments that they enter in. So I think the journey that you go on throughout an academy, whilst we're having a discussion here around how it can be better, I think it's fantastic. I really do. I think
Yeah.
it's fantastic. and I think it's improved tremendously since 1998 when I went into it.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I wouldn't disagree.
but,
My
but as you're saying, there are questions to be asked, and there can we do things even more impactful
yeah,
with regards to the
and
holistic approach.
yeah. So my couple of thoughts on that would I don't disagree. So if that's the case, playing devil's advocate, how many academies do you know that have key performance metrics around those things?
Um, so when the EPPP initially came in 10,
Yeah,
12 years ago, whenever that was, I was at Man City. I was part of a number of different working groups that they sent out to different clubs all over the world and organisations to look at how they integrated double pass and things like that back in the day.
yeah,
And obviously, within the initial 10 KPIs, they did include a number of those characteristics, traits, scenarios, experiences, etc., etc. I'm not working in the academy system now. I know that that's evolved. I know that that's changed somewhat. But I know the principle behind the initial academy structure that was integrated through Jed Roddy at the time at the Premier League was there to, and I'm not going to say tick a box, it wasn't, because at that point there were a number of individuals that were brought into clubs. For example, psychologists. I
yeah,
myself was brought into Man City to run the player life skills program for 3 years. Um, which integrated parent programs, integrated staff into the programs so that they had a greater understanding of the psychophysiology, the socio-psychology of players, and so on and so forth. So that was a fundamental principle behind the first iteration of the EPPP. That was
yeah,
involved then. We're now, as I say, 12 years on.
yeah, yeah. And because I would say for me, the points you make there are absolutely brilliant. I've often thought sometimes a, a, a nice litmus test of how well your academy is doing in this holistic development of a person is if you do have to release them at 18 and they've been there for 10 years, do they go out thinking, I disagree with what Man City have said there, but I'm glad I did it? And the door's always open. I know that I could go back and get some advice from Tony, because I got a real sense that they cared about me. And in that included them being really brutally honest at times about what this industry is.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's a real. There's no need. If we're all going into this for what it is, which is high end, elite level
Absolutely, yeah.
football, there's no need for people to stand up going, "Well, it's easy." You're going, "No, no, no. This is what it, and this is what I do with parents and with their kids of going. Here's 300 players, 300 odd players who went through this before, and this is what they say. So I'm not making this up. This is their take on it. How are we then going to manage this process?" And I think if you do that as a club, you're right. You can start to say you are going to get through. You're going to get these experiences as you go through. And I think then strategically as a club, you can be a bit more like, are we definitely doing this? Like, are we? Because if we're saying we're doing it, let's do it properly.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's make sure we do this because then we are. I think as groups of staff and things, you're then going, yeah, no, I'm behind this because we are doing what we're saying, not just leaving it for, well, everybody knows playing football helps you to win and lose properly and these sort of. That's fluffy. Are we talking about vulnerability? Are we talking about courage? Because that's going to. Okay, we released this kid at 18, we released this kid at 19. But those conversations that went that deep really help for the rest of life, whatever you go on to do. And by the way, if you come into our first team, that's also going to help as well. I think in that
Chris,
that's a place where we're
how about this? Are you up for coming back? We'll have another conversation,
always,
and
always.
we'll frame it around. your research and your suggestions for solutions moving forward. Let's put it out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and I would say if people have got questions about stuff we've talked about here, throw them. I'm very, very open as a researcher. I've grown up in an environment, you go to academic conferences, people ask you really difficult questions,
Yeah,
and it's great. I thrive off it. I never want to be standing here going, I know everything,
yeah,
this is what you should.
yeah.
But I do know what data tells me,
Mhm.
and I know it can help people. So yeah, if people are commenting on stuff, like we'll do another session, and if
Yeah,
there's things that people want answering, and we can throw our thoughts in there. And the next time, I'll have my Sheffield Wednesday shirt behind me
good lad. Don't blame
to
you.
go alongside your Man City.
It needs all the support they can get at the moment.
They do,
Uh,
they do indeed.
let's do that then. And what I'm going to endeavour to do is to get a academy manager on the call with us.
Yes, that'd be great.
That would be good to have that very open conversation where both can challenge and debate each other. I'll just play the referee. I'll facilitate.
Right.
But that I think that could be a fruitful
Yeah,
conversation for everyone involved.
yeah.
But let's
I'd,
let's
I'd
do
like
that.
to think, I'd like to think me and the academy manager could be on the same side as well. Like I'm not just here to bash up against somebody in that respect. I think it's something that can help. But yeah, it'd be great to have those debates around
Yeah,
the challenges of
yeah,
of working at the coalface,
yeah.
so to speak.
Okay. All right, Chris, it's been great. We've been on coming up to 50 minutes, just over 50 minutes now.
Great,
Really enjoyed speaking to you. I know there's a lot more that we can go into here with regards to your research, the experiences I've had, but let's pick up again. Let's do part two, and let's get an academy manager involved in the conversation.
brilliant. I look forward to it. Thanks, Tony.
I appreciate your time, Chris. We'll catch up soon.